You are tuned in to the FowlWeather Podcast, the forecast to your next successful hunt. Coming to you from the home office, Jack's Reef, New York.
For some, it was the season of the storm. For others, the worst season they can remember, and others, the best season they ever had. The winter that has not yet happened for some, and the winter that made their season for others. The third year of the FowlWeather Podcast brought us a welcoming calm of the fake news by other podcasts. We had a drought, but ducks for many. And the corn conversation came to a head. We also recognized once again that weather plays a major role in duck migration timing and the later season duck shuffle. Plus, we also noticed that telemetry doesn't tell us everything. We dissect these hot topics for the year and analyze how well our long-term duck migration forecast played out throughout duck country. All today on the FowlWeather Podcast. A quick reminder to rate, follow, like, and share the FowlWeather Podcast to get all the latest updates and our exclusive duck migration forecast each Monday morning throughout season, plus all of our informative content throughout the year. Be the guy at the coffee shop with the real information about the ducks and where the ducks are at. We appreciate y'all very, very much. We thank our every week listeners. You know who you are. Those that never miss a single migration forecast episode each Monday morning. Y'all are as ate up as me about ducks, duck biology, and duck migration. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. Think about that. You know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they are at. Our dedicated weekly listeners can pick the best days to hunt because the FowlWeather Podcast forecasts fresh ducks hot from the north. Shoot the ducks from the north before they know where they're at. I'm your host, Dr. Mike, coming from you from the very chilly home office in Jack's Reef. With our farm just south of Lake Ontario, we are getting lake effect snow pretty much every day on a north or northwest wind. Yesterday, we got another 6 inches of snow, putting us at 120 inches of snow for the year, about 40 inches above normal. But the snow does melt some and settles, so we are sitting at about 36 inches of snow on the ground right now. With 20-mile-per-hour winds yesterday, we hit about negative 20 degrees with wind chill. So it was a day to sit inside and reflect on the 25-26 duck season. With an ongoing sudden stratospheric warming happening and a split of the polar vortex, I was fairly certain we would be in for it east of the Rockies for the rest of February, with very cold coming all the rest of the month. But it turns out that the Madden-Julian Oscillation, which is a major eastward moving disturbance of clouds, rainfall, winds, and pressure that traverses the global tropics in kind of a 30 to 60 day rotation, the Madden-Julian Oscillation is up to some business at the same time that is going to squeeze the North American portion of the polar vortex that split off like grabbing a half-full balloon in the middle. The Madden-Julian Oscillation is going to act like a mini El Nino event for about 2 weeks, resulting in areas over the Rockies and west. Actually, over the Rockies and west, not east, but over the west being cooler than normal, and the central Mississippi and Atlantic flyways areas east of the Rockies being warmer than normal as we go into mid-February. With an already pretty darn dry U.S. and western Canadian prairies, this does not bode well for the snow accumulation in the near future to recharge our prairie wetlands. Now, here's the deal. When we hit the last third of February and into early March, this effect slows and we get back to a more normal kind of stretched polar vortex pattern with cold and snow coming back to the prairies, Midwest, and the Great Lakes over to the Northeast U.S. So I don't think all is lost yet for ducks heading back to a prairie landscape, because my forecast continues for kind of a late 1-2 punch of snow for the prairies to fill in the void and potentially for a late lingering winter and wet spring. A lingering late winter and wet spring. Of course, the timing of this stuff is key because cold and wet at the wrong time is devastating to ducklings. But snow and cold at the right time and warm, wet rains can be beneficial. Poorly timed cold and wet rains just after hatch of ducklings are bad because ducklings are not yet feathered and can easily die from hypothermia. Nothing is certain right now, but we will keep reporting. So we sit and wait at the farm for the slow showing of spring. And right now, we're just happy with lengthening days. We're starting to book clients for habitat management during the summer. And we finalized our relationship with Hancock Seed to bring you 3 food plot mixes engineered to deliver continuous attraction while also improving soil health and plot sustainability. Carefully selected for reliable and seasonal nutrition, our Northern Deer food plot mix and Southern and Northern Waterfowl food plot mixes are designed to establish strong and consistent forage and keep deer and waterfowl coming back throughout the season. You can find us by going to Hancock Seed, the Hancock Seed website, and then searching FowlWeather, F-O-W-L, weather as one word. They are still sourcing seed, so if you're interested, click on Notify Me when back in stock and enter your email so you can get your hands on these mixes before they are gone. All right, enough promotion for now. Back to farm business. The wood stove is roaring. The yellow labs are curling up, enjoying the heat. And we reflect on the season and go back and see how well our long-term forecast did at predicting weather affecting duck migration. All next on the FowlWeather Podcast, so please stick with me. We all know that feeling. Every waterfowl hunter knows the feeling. You're motionless in the marsh at first light, watching birds work the spread, hoping this season is as good as the last, hoping that the future has birds working the spread for generations to come. At the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, the mission is simple: to guarantee all Americans quality places to hunt and fish. For waterfowl hunters, that means safeguarding habitat and migration corridors and creating more places to hunt, so strong fall flights and good hunting opportunities aren't a thing of the past. As the nation's largest coalition of conservation groups, TRCP brings together hunters, anglers, and conservation partners to make sure the future of waterfowl hunting stays strong. Learn more today and join the TRCP by visiting trcp.org. All right, and we are back. Of the topics we listed in the introduction, the one we want to talk about the least, yes, the least, is the corn debate. Because it is not a debate, and we need listeners to realize one glaring fact that they may not be aware of. In the letter by Senator John Kennedy to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about the supposed evils of crops planted for wildlife, you may have noticed one very important nuance. That Mr. Kennedy asked for a study. Yes, a study of flooded corn. Many may not be aware, but in political lingo, this is code for "this isn't going anywhere and I'm just appeasing my base." Just so you are aware, and no matter how much you read on social media about corn and ducks, this isn't going anywhere. Overall, yeah, it's entertaining. But don't give it any more attention. We repeat, don't give it any more attention. Let the corn debate fade into oblivion like so many other debates of the past. We moved on from the spinning wing decoy debate, and we moved on from the harvest of hens and harvest drive duck populations debates quickly. I love that folks are seeing the light and hope that more follow. I hope we recognize that supporting a re-strengthening of the Clean Water Act and other wetland protections are what ducks need. We need solid agricultural policy that really protects grasslands in ways that matter. Focus on keeping wild places wild for people and ducks. And of course, all these habitat topics seem distant, but keep your ear to the ground because there is a lot of rumbling in the background that we could be elevating to the top of the debate list and letting things like corn and harvest dwindle to the bottom. Of course, in the past year, we saw a major redirection of many waterfowl-focused podcasts about harvest discussion because it became abundantly clear that the doom and gloom was neither necessary nor helpful. Harvest does not drive duck populations for our most commonly harvested species. In our years of producing the podcast, we are proud to have helped bring the fake news to its knees. And don't take this as an us against them. All we have ever done at the FowlWeather Podcast is produce the only science-based duck migration forecast available each week throughout season and ensure our friends across duck country are armed with the quality information they deserve as the hunter conservationists that they are. We call out BS where we see it, but all we are doing is arming duck country, USA, and Canada with the quality information they deserve as hunter conservationists that they are. Of course, you will continue to hear it all, the BS. Quote unquote, we need to close the season for a few years to help the ducks. Or if we quit growing and flooding corn, we will have all the ducks we need in Louisiana once again. Or if we ban guides in Canada, then we would have ducks to shoot later in season down here. Or if they would just flood the trees when they were green, we would have ducks once again. And all the other BS that has filled your wavelengths for years. But the suggestion? Just ignore it. Increasingly ignore that social media content. Don't engage it and let it fade into the oblivion of fake news like those podcast episodes that got it all so wrong in the past. Let it fade. Be strong enough to let it fade. Put the phone down and don't engage with the fake news. Don't argue. Just let the light shine through by focusing on the positive news and the hunter conservationist actions that will really help sustain ducks and duck hunting. All right. Up next, how was your season and how did the FowlWeather Podcast do at forecasting ducky weather for 25-26? And we're also going to dig into where were the ducks really at and what did telemetry not tell us. So please stick with me. It is months until planting season, but your vision is already clear. The land is your passion, and Hancock Seed has your back. You plan food plots to feed and attract game in ways that matter for months. Live on your land with Hancock Seed. Today you plan, tomorrow you harvest. With Hancock Seed, you get family farm faith, nearly a century in the making. Hancock Seed has partnered with FowlWeather to produce 3 distinct seed blends. The Northern Deer Food Plot Mix, a proven combination that keeps deer coming all year round. The Southern Waterfowl Mix for carbohydrate-driven ducks. And the Northern Waterfowl Mix, built to succeed even in the toughest summers. Hancock Seed specializes from turf to plow and beyond. Find them today at hancockseed.com. That's hancockseed.com. In the end, the West was not the best this year, but indeed the East was a beast. In the middle of the Pacific Flyway and Atlantic Flyways, the Central Flyway was a mixed bag, and the Mississippi Flyway delivered for many better than the recent past. Remember that we are in a duck deficit from years of poor breeding habitat conditions on the prairies and continued assault on duck habitat from the ag sector. We must accept that we had a moderate to low duck population going into this duck season. Early and persistent cold came to Alaska and Pacific Flyway provinces, which moved ducks into the Canadian prairies and upper portions of the Pacific Flyway in the States. But then everything stalled, and many other than the most northern folks in the Pacific Flyway basically had a duck season that never happened until the last week of season when winter weather swept in and helped folks pick up a few more ducks before it all ended. In the Central and Mississippi Flyways, the delay in cold snaps was real and held ducks into the northern prairie and upper Midwest. But once the WSI, the Weather Severity Index, hit the threshold for mallards to migrate, this was around Thanksgiving, it was generally done up north, and ducks moved south in abundance thereafter. Farther south in Iowa, numbers of dabbling ducks dropped off quickly by early December and moved out earlier than years past. But the drought had an impact as well, and those that had water held ducks farther south, and those that did not suffered. In the Central Flyway, the cold that came was less, and ducks generally held up hard at mid-latitudes. This also happened in the Mississippi Flyway, but the strong drought conditions pushed the early migrating ducks more so, the wimpy ducks, farther south towards coastal regions in abundance. Then, the fall rains never came for these ducks, especially pintails, to make a major move back north from the coast, a typical movement on dry years. Ducks will go to the coast, especially pintails, and then blast out thereafter to take advantage of new habitat as fall rains come, but those never happened in the Mississippi Flyway. In the Atlantic Flyway, the worst drought in 15 years or more hit the northeast U.S., and ducks just never stopped. It was a flyover year, plus mild early and November. I guess it was mild early, and November was the best push of ducks for the most of us. But then December just locked up hard. A couple thaws provided opportunities to some, but most ducks moved south faster than normal based on a lack of wetlands. Then the cold set in, and many, I'd say in the latitude of North Carolina, had their best season in memory. It was the season of have and have-nots, with many having their best seasons in memory and others firing few shots. Many will remember it, too, as the season of the storm that shut down their season because of the weather, but it also pushed ducks more than telemetry will tell you. We will end this episode with a comparison between our long-term forecast from back in October and November with what really happened with weather that drives duck migration. But first, a little commentary here on telemetry.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
People, please slow your roll. Telemetry is a powerful tool, but remember that it is among the many tools in the toolbox, and it has its biases. First, you have to catch a duck, and not every duck is able to be caught. So does telemetry tell you what every type of duck does? No, it tells you about what ducks did that can be caught. Think about that. Second, does the telemetry unit affect the behavior of a duck compared to a duck without a telemetry unit? Yes. The answer to that is always yes. The first rule in marking animals is that every mark affects the duck in some way. Is it enough to make the duck different than an unmarked duck? Possibly. But the number of studies we produce prior to slamming units on ducks is lacking. Period. It is lacking. Third, do we mark ducks in the right places to make generalizations about how ducks migrate at the landscape scale? In this, we should answer emphatically and definitively no. Data produced by the ducks we mark tell us about the ducks marked at that location, period. 4, do we mark ducks at the right time to make generalizations about how ducks migrate at the landscape and season-long scale? I'm going to slow down. Do we mark ducks at the right time to make generalizations about how ducks migrate at the landscape and season-long scale? In this, we should also answer emphatically and definitively no. Data produced by ducks we mark tell us about the ducks that we marked at the time that we mark them. 5. Millions, yes, millions of ducks in different places at different times doing different things than the ducks we mark are what we're ignoring. And we are ignoring them in our social media posts. We are accepting, lots of times, that marked ducks are acting the same as ducks of that species everywhere at the same time. And that's simply not true. 6. The public is looking at social media posts and podcast interviews as how all ducks act. And that is definitely not true. Again, let's slow our roll. 7. Don't vilify me for pointing out the obvious, that the job of scientists is to have a hypothesis, produce a quality study design that decreases biases to the greatest degree possible to test said hypothesis. And again, well, let's think about this. And if those biases are too great, you should never conduct the study. Okay. Then after that, either reject or fail to reject the hypothesis. To be clear, we never prove anything. And if you ever hear the term prove about telemetry used, you should call BS. And then we should also consider the other ethical obligations of scientists to call BS when they see BS. Telemetry is a powerful tool. The public loves it and will fund it. But we need to be careful to see through the dollar signs and the hammer that is telemetry to understand what it can and cannot tell us. Are there more eloquent ways to answer the same question? Did you ever do the homework to figure out if there were other eloquent ways to answer the same question? Maybe you didn't because someone threw money at you to put telemetry units on a duck. Are there other measures that can complement your work? And maybe banding alone is not the answer. Maybe there is more that telemetry can't tell us than we currently recognize or are told. The ask, do we mark enough ducks? And let's just go with mallards here. Have we marked enough mallards? And by enough mallards, I mean, have we marked mallards capable of being caught and those that are not being capable of being caught? And have we marked them across the landscape they use in space and time? Have we marked enough of them to make comments on how mallards use the landscape that duck hunters see each day during their hunting season? And have we marked them across enough years of different weather conditions to be sure we know how they react to weather? Telemetry is a powerful tool. In that power and data collected, there is a space to make comments. Let us not keep doubling down on data that have substantial restrictions because of known but ignored biases. For the point of this podcast, the duck hunting public deserves better. But in deeper context, the science community deserves better. Heck, the ducks deserve better. The information produced goes way beyond any wildlife biologist's career. It is our ethical obligation to the ducks. Heck, do good by that. Be good to the ducks. And at the end of the day, did you do everything you can for the ducks? Maybe? Or maybe work on it more. Up next, did we get the forecast right? Beckman Game Calls has it dialed in. If you want a duck call that is adjustable to your air pressure and sounds like a duck, this is it. I've blown a ton of different calls in my life, but this one is the real deal. Look, we don't endorse just anything. We are only going to put forward a call that works. The Edison by Chris Beckman of Beckman Game Calls, yeah, this beauty sounds like a duck. I only know of one published research paper focused on what makes a duck call sound like a duck. Go look me up, and you will see that colleagues and I have the only paper published in scientific literature about what makes a duck call sound like a duck. For sure, Chris Beckman did his homework, and this call sounds like a duck. This guy knows how to make a duck call, period. But don't just take my word for it. Here's the proof. First, a hen recording, and then the Edison in the big woods of Arkansas. Visit them today at BeckmanGameCalls.com. Woohoo, yeah, Chris Beckman is back open for business, so get your call now. There are really just a few limited edition FowlWeather Podcast calls left too. I think he said something like 5 or 6 last time that we chatted, but I know that since he opened back up for business on the 1st of February that he has been busy filling orders. So anyhow, get after it and look at Beckman Game Calls and get your cut down call today. So anyhow, a little bit from the last bit on telemetry and so on. Lots of food for thought there in this episode and lots to discuss with family and friends in the off season for sure. Even though we're going to our once every 2-week format for the kind of, non-duck season, that doesn't mean it won't be packed with information. So please hang on with us in the off season for great guests, wetland habitat tips, continued coverage of breeding habitat conditions, the BPOP episode, and, entry into the next season with our long-term duck migration forecast. It never ends, my friends, and the off-season is not an off-season. The duck season never ends at the FowlWeather Podcast. Getting into kind of how the long-term forecast did relative to how the weather turned out, by the FowlWeather Podcast, I do think the FowlWeather Podcast team missed a bit more than in the past on the first long-term forecast. This season had a lot of uncertainties going into it and some substantial changes in course along the way. From watching an abundance of meteorological information available, this was just the norm for the year, right? Like short-term 10 to 7-day forecast did a lot better than generalizations about snow and cold potential across longer terms. I do think we recovered a few weeks later after that first long-term forecast when we did the second long-term forecast that had some kind of tighter predictions about how atmospheric pressure systems and thus weather was going to act in the 25-26 duck season. But here is still a quote from the second long-term forecast this year. Here's the quote. I do have to admit, though, our own attempt to make heads or tails of the forecast are difficult because several models are pushing in different directions. But right now, the Euro model or European weather model and the GFS, which is the U.S. or North American model, are in agreement about a major disturbance in atmosphere starting in the west with a nudge just before Thanksgiving and thereafter into mid-December for the bulk of duck country USA. So I think we hit on that one because really the weather turned right after Thanksgiving. But an item I thought we really got wrong was the Pacific Flyway for this year, that we called a slam dunk for a quality duck migration based on early predictions that never manifested until just recently. The end of duck season finally got a shot of weather for the west, but before that it was mild. The hope now is that cold and snow continues through the rest of winter to improve duck habitat conditions in the west. For the east, we made this prediction. Here's the quote. I am still bullish on the late November and early December duck push with a major warm-up for much of the U.S. into January. This is likely more of an eastern U.S. perspective than elsewhere. Hey, that pretty much played out with the cold in the Central and Mississippi flyways starting around Thanksgiving, and then in the Atlantic flyway around the beginning of December, and then remaining cold and moving ducks south earlier than the recent past. Overall, east of the Rockies, we kind of hit the nail on the head. Here's that quote. The expectation is that the November and December cold and snow will move ducks south better than we've seen in years for the central Mississippi and Atlantic flyways, with the Mississippi Flyway being the winner chicken dinner. This stands out solid with our first long-term migration forecast. That is, it stands with it. But we do continue to caution that after the new year, the likelihood of mild weather conditions south of the latitude of the Boot Heel of Missouri could make ducks super stale. And I think this one will hit home with a bunch of you. Here's the quote. For the central Mississippi and Atlantic flyways, given the past, current, and predicted weather, it is expected that most early ducks will have moved into final locales by mid-December this year. Those are the pintails, gadwall, widgeon, green-winged teal, and shovelers. The mallards and black ducks will have mostly moved into respectable locations relative to prior years, but as we've seen in past years, many, many more will linger north. An additional movement will happen, but this year, more than others, ducks will be where they are going to be before the new year, and it will be super important to hunt ducks based on local conditions. Man, I think that's what we all felt. We have high hopes that the prairie snow prediction plays out still, and we hope to get that snow going, but its uncertainty continues to exist. We correctly predicted a holdout of snow in the U.S. prairies for early winter. That is, early in the winter, that we wouldn't have a lot of snow in the U.S. prairies. But we really still haven't seen that U.S. snow event that we continue to predict coming. Regarding lake effect snow in the Great Lakes, we nailed that one down quite well. The prediction here was this, in quotes. In the central and Mississippi flyways, snow holds largely in the Canadian prairies until January. But the La Nina unleashes in February and March with a perfectly timed recharge of the prairies. In no way can this be a one-and-done snow recharge of the prairies, but it looks like a good start with the Canadian prairies getting the best of it and the U.S. prairies just behind. The Great Lakes looks a good amount of lake effect snow in December that will be widespread, but then slowing down into concentrated bands of lake effect in January. For ducks, this basically means that the cold and snow will move ducks south better than past years into January, but there remains concern for a major January thaw that will see lake effect with cold and warm conditions flex back and forth. That lake effect with cold and warm conditions flexed back and forth is what a bunch of us marsh hunters saw, and we hit it and had some success. But it was more limited melt. It was definitely a more limited melt, especially in this La Nina year contrasted with El Nino years that typically produce better melt and flood conditions and shooting in the north into December. But we still have not seen that U.S. prairie snow. Fingers crossed for early March. Our second long-term forecast of 25-26, that was the core of our prediction for the year, kind of east of the Rockies, gave the best and correct insight, I think. Here's what we said. Look, duck numbers are down, so please keep your expectations low. But the theme this year has continued to be the same. And by continued to be the same, we meant kind of since our first long-term forecast. Ducks should move south on schedule like the past and better than we've seen in years. Take advantage of them on the front end because the latter part of the season looks like a warm-up in the south. And even with ducks available, local weather conditions are unlikely to regularly provide shooting opportunities after the first week of January. Think we nailed that one. Of course, we missed on the storm of storms for the Mississippi and Atlantic flyways at the end of season. The final comment on the 2025-2026 season from the FowlWeather Podcast long-term forecast was this. This long-term forecast contrasts with that El Nino year from the past when the forecast was the complete opposite and it barely provided ducks by January. We can all agree on that. Hope you all had a good season. There were ups and downs. There were folks that had them and there were folks that not. But we had a better migration this year than we have had in years past. We all can stick together on that one. Thanks for listening. And as always, may your skies be filled and shoot straight, my friends.